Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there, and welcome back to the show. As always, my name is Samantha Parrish, and I'm your lean, mean media queen, The Screen Queen. It's going to get a little weird, it's going to get a little wild, but we're going to have a good time. I've talked on this show many times about how animation is one of my favorite avenues of storytelling. Like, I can eat, sleep, and drink it. If I could possibly do more to it, I would, because that's how much I love animation. And growing up with Disney movies, I love seeing the way that everything came to an evolution. But when the TV shows came up, that was a different story. It was kind of a hit and miss with me. Even as I got older and I didn't get into too much of the shows that Disney was providing, I also heard that Disney wasn't doing a lot of providing for their shows. I say that because I was a little disappointed to find out that after Kim Possible went off the air, there was this decline. Think about it. Disney had done a pretty good job in the sitcoms and animated shows in the 90s, the 2000s, and then near the end of the 2000s into the 2010s, there was this dead zone. And then Gravity Falls came around and made a whole new age of entertainment for children. And that was followed with Star vs. the Forces of Evil. Star vs. the Forces of Evil has been one of the best surprises that Disney has had in many years. And for it to come off the coattails of something like Gravity Falls to still be as mature and still as fun as the other show without having to feel like it can't breathe its own life to be a brand new show for another generation getting into Disney. But it also went to other generations. It went to me being a millennial, it went to others being in Gen Z. There were others that loved this story, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a universal show that has universal elements that comes from many different types of media. This is one of my all-time favorite Disney shows, and I'm so excited to talk about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, and by non-binary babes, this is Star vs. the Forces of Evil. Now, I know a majority of the people I know in real life know what the show is, but just in case there is anyone out there that has never heard of this show, it is okay. It's not on everyone's radar. I will explain what the show is about. Star vs. the Forces of Evil follows a young princess named Star Butterfly, and man, she's a handful. She is very ecstatic for life. She loves using magic, but unfortunately, she's not very careful with what she does with her magic. So her parents decide, let's put her on Earth. Let's have her get another experience with life. And she is dumped on Earth. Her parents give a shit ton of money to the school to just go ahead and put her in there. And Star ends up meeting a young boy named Marco Diaz, who is a karate enthusiast. And at first, Marco and Star, they get to a bit of a rough start. You can see the duality immediately between these characters, where Marco is very disciplined and Star is, well, Star. Star quickly learns to take it easy, to not jump ahead. She starts to be more strategic in the way that she can use her magic, but she has to be careful when she uses her magic. And she's got Marco along for the ride on every single adventure, mixed with demon ex-boyfriends, ponyhead princesses. The show had a perfect balance of having the most zany ideas that go far beyond imagination, that makes you wonder what Darren Nefsey was smoking when she made this show, and having that blended with real slices of life. There were problems that Marco and Star went through that feel parallel to problems that we go through in everyday life, that feel authenticated and validated. There's often been a joke and reference made to Star vs. the Forces of Evil is that it feels like Mork and Mindy. And if my listeners are familiar with that show that came out in the 80s, no, 70s, I'm sorry. It has the premise that is very very eerily similar to Star versus the Forces of Evil, with a intergalactic being from far, far away with very bizarre powers coming to Earth and then ends up making fast friends and moving in with one of the Earthlings. Yet it never felt like plagiarism. It never really felt like it was a copycat. If anything, a lot of people praised it for being similar to Mork and Mindy without being Mork and Mindy. It almost feels like Mork and Mindy for kids. There are many reasons why I love the show, and I know I'm going to be going into different directions, but the one thing that I do want to start out with that came to my mind is I love how clever this show is. There are many shows where you have to do your homework to understand a reference. Star doesn't really do that. Star had a very unique way of just putting it out there and then knowing that it's a clear reference to a TV show or a character or the plot itself. There's a part near the end of the seasons where they had to do a cast change for the character Glossaric, who was originally voiced by Jeffrey Tambor. And Jeffrey Tambor was one of the many, 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 many people accused and tried for the allegations of sexual assault. And with the allegations getting increasingly worse towards Jeffrey Tambor, the evidence is damning against him. There's no choice but to fire him. Why would you want to work with a predator? No one wants it, especially in a fucking kid's show. That's the thing that gets me the most, was like, yikes, he was involved with a television show for children. So they chose none other than the great and the amazing Keith David, who, as a fun fact, already has a past with Disney because he voiced Dr. Facilier and Princess and the Frog. So he's no stranger to Disney. But they made it so fucking obvious that it still kills me that you see both of the characters just go, did Glossaric sound different to you? Like, I don't think I've ever seen any other shows do that, and if they did, it's very few and far between. I love that they had to do that. They didn't have to, but that's the beautiful thing about Star, is that it doesn't make an audience feel stupid. I love that anything they have in there to show children is not to sugarcoat what happens, but also to hold your hand as you're going through anything with life. Like, there are so many kids shows that it kind of feels like jingling plastic keys, and kids don't get enough credit for how they can put things together. Kids are always hungry for information, and yeah, they're gonna wonder why Glossaric sounds different, but now they know that this show had to silently address why Glossaric sounds different. So we're almost 10 minutes into this episode, and I figure now would be a good time for me to actually refer to the notes that I made about this. The show is just so good that I can literally go with this script or not. But there are some very good points that I wrote down. And the first one that I see, it's the one that had really led me to want to cover this, is the shipping of all the characters. Now, I'll admit, it is fun to be able to see what characters come together in the show, but then also having the imagination of an alternate reality of other characters that could have been together. I mean, that's the whole point of shipping. It's just, fun with the what if factor. I've done my fair share of shipping. I mean, it's the sole reason that I wrote too many fan fictions. But when it came to this show, there are a lot of characters that I was interested in seeing what was going to happen, and from the get-go, I'm like, okay, they're going to try and angle that Star and Marco are going to end up together. But then they pulled this card on the show, where Marco ended up dating the girl that he had a crush on, and Star ended up dating her ex-boyfriend, Tom. Personally, I found it to be a very refreshing change that I did not think the endgame was going to happen. And I also like that Star and Marco came to their own resolves, that they both had a crush on each other, but they were just like ships in the night. And that was such a heavy thing to put into a kid's television show, as someone who's been the ship in the night and then been someone else's ship in the night. Like, it's a tough slice of life, having to like someone and then know that life has to go on, and if by some chance they come around, well, the ship left the harbor. There's so many things around love depicted in children's television shows that gets it right and that gets it wrong. But this, I loved it that it acclimated it to the kind of romantic interest that you would see among teenagers. It's very far and few and in between. And personally, I really liked the fact that Tom and Star were together. That was my favorite couple that I loved outside the show, and when I found out that I was actually going to be in the show, I had to pinch myself. I thought I was dreaming. I loved the way that everything angled back Tom and Star being together in a way that did not feel forced, but was also appropriate to their character development. And gosh darn it, they were cute together. I stand by the romantic relationship of Tom and Star. I really loved their dynamic. There was such great character development between the both of them where Star had gradually matured and Tom took care of his literal demons and his metaphorical demons, making him healthier to go in a relationship and wasn't just begging Star to come back, that he had to earn that. He didn't want to change Star, but he knew that he had to change himself in all the right ways. People are attracted to maturity. And that's a better example with Tom. Marco is also mature in his own ways, but Marco's going through his own things with life. And he also had his own growing up to do. Every one of these characters in this show had a life outside of their romantic exploits. And a lot of that really worked well together, so that way it didn't feel like a forced relationship. The one thing that was kind of an early flag into the show was that Tom wanted Star back because Star was moving on, and Tom refused to accept that. But once Tom accepted that he can't change Star and let her be her own person, that opened up Star to come back, that she can trust Tom, that he's not going to try and change her. And damn it, it was so cool to see how supportive Tom was in their unfortunately short-lived relationship. But I'll get into that much later on in the episode. Never once did I feel these characters were being toxic to each other. They were all like walking orange flags that could easily be a green flag. But I did see ahead before I even finished the season that Marco and Star were going to be endgame. And I can't believe that I'm sad about the two characters that I knew were going to end up together, ended up together. Like, it feels like a strange sentence to say that because I love both of those characters. Hell, I love all the characters, even the villains, because everyone is written to a perfection to the point that I want to call Oxford Dictionary and say they need to update the word perfect with just a picture of this show. Star was the first for many things. And I wish this would have been the first show to have the non-traditional endgame of the characters ending up together. If they did that with Gravity Falls, I don't know why the fuck they couldn't do this here, because I was not happy with the way that the romantic stuff ended with this show. TV has changed now to treat their characters the way that we would treat others, that you have to make room for change, that what you perceive about someone is not going to be the same all the way through, and you have to be okay with their changes, or you have to be okay to walk away from them. Star had the best of both worlds, where relationships were tested in all of the best ways, but in all of the mature ways. To see her relationship tested with Marco, to see how Tom truly did change himself, and the way that Marco had to come to terms that he's liked Star all along, but none of this felt forced. It did make a bit of a bizarre triangle, but nonetheless, at least it was a triangle. A part of me still wishes that they kept the plot with Star and Tom all the way through, and I'm not just saying this because of the fact that I originally liked them both as a couple and didn't let the TV show change the way that I felt about them, but I had to see it from the perspective of writing to know how far these characters have come, and it's a weird complaint, but then also a point of praise that they did eventually have Star and Marco end up together, and they had all the characters be okay in their own realm, and he knew that they were going to be okay afterwards, which is saying a lot that these characters that who are probably around 14 years old have shown how to handle change. But there was another shipping problem that happened, and this didn't even happen on the show, it happened off the show. What I'm about to tell you is probably one of the craziest things I've witnessed with my own two eyes on the internet. A while ago when I was on Tumblr, of course I lived those days. I was hungry for anything that I could get my hands on for more Star stuff. Any fan art, any fan fictions, anything with my favorite couple, Tom and Star. I ate it all. But then I found a tag that had to do with the characters Queen, Moon, and Toffee. And for those that have never seen the show, that is Star's mother and the villain that took up a good 75% of the show. And I saw they were placed romantically together, and I'm like, well, someone had an idea. What spawned this on? And it was a wild tag that I went on to see how people were feeding into this alternate idea of Moon and Toffee being together. And I saw the logic behind it, the whole forbidden romance or tragic love, but oh no, someone put a fucking stop to it immediately. I just slammed my desk, but that's how serious it was. Someone on Tumblr commented on one of the posts regarding this alternate idea that Moon and Toffee could have been a couple before or after the events of Star versus the Forces of Evil happened. And what this person had to say, it stuck with me. It still sticks with me. I wish most of the words stuck with me, but I'm going to tell you bits and pieces of what I remembered. The user had commented about the logic around the show, that this is a character whose mother was murdered by Toffee. And this user began to explain why it's a very disturbing thing to have to ship two people where you know why they have to be enemies, that there's no reason to make them romantic. And no one dared to argue with this user on Tumblr. It was said in a way that got the point across without being disrespectful. And I watched the internet collectively stop that pairing altogether. That was a first for me to see the internet have no arguments with itself. And the internet loves to argue. But there is absolutely no doubt that the strongest part of this show lies in the commentary. I mentioned earlier that LGBT themes have been sprinkled into this show, making it one of the first shows to ever project a positive idea that there's nothing wrong with the LGBT community. Like, if Disney's able to do that, then what else can they do? Well, let me tell you, never before in my life have I ever seen any show, whether it was Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, or CW, cover domestic violence and racism. Yeah, this show packed a lot in 4 seasons. There's an episode where Queen Moon is trying to stop Ludo, the villain from the first season, and she speaks with his parents. Ludo's mother has a black eye. Ludo's father looks enraged. Ludo's brother looks like he's about to kill Ludo's father. Like, you can tell the tension solely with the way that the mother is terrified and the way that she is just so nervous, in the usual way that you do see someone going through a critical situation of domestic violence. Everything was handled so perfectly there to show kids what happens in a situation like that. And the fact that it exists in a children's show is amazing. I have so much respect for this show to be the first of many, but to also know how to handle these certain situations to show kids. And then there's the whole thing about racism. Whoa. Racism in many shows can go one way or another. Sometimes has the most thought-provoking commentary, and unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't go well. But for the most part, a lot of kid shows today are making a very good fast pace into showing what happens. This show is one of the best examples I've seen in years. I'm just going to say it. The way that they made the angle about racism was the way the Mumins and the monsters
from the get-go of the show, the monsters have been the enemy of the humans. But as time went on, the monsters were not as bad as they were made out to be, that they're literally just trying to survive. They're going about their lives, and Star put a stop to it after she befriended a character named Buff Frog, also called Yevgeny. That made her change her mind and started a treaty to get monsters and humans to live together, that the humans cannot discriminate against the monsters. But unfortunately, Star's plan went in vain. That didn't stop the humans from being the same that they were, to still continue to discriminate against the monsters. Star tries everything to change the humans, to make them wake up and stop being hateful towards others that have the same beating heart, that have the same passion for life, that deserve the same rights. But it didn't work out like Star wanted it to. People could not forget the old ways. They couldn't really forget about what happened before. And the monsters, to a degree, understood the way that they could not erase the past of what happened, that things have been progressing, but some people just unfortunately don't change. So the monsters had to do what was best for themselves, and they left Muni altogether to head to another dimension that would be more safe for them. Star pleaded with the monsters to not go, that she would try everything in her power. And Yevgeny had put his hand on Star and just said, Star, I really appreciate that you care for us so much, that you want rights for us. But as a parent, I have to do what's right for my children, and I can't have my children growing up in a place that is going to discriminate them for no valid reason. I have to think of their safety. And that's a incredibly valid reason. Even though Star can do anything, she has shown such maturity, and with her being a future queen, that is the kind of quality you want in a queen, for someone that will care for her subjects and do the right thing. I mean, shit, politics should be taking some notes from Star Butterfly, for Christ's sake. But there was one last attempt to try and keep the monsters in Muni, and that's where Tom comes in. Now, I mentioned earlier that Tom got together with Star midway during the season and became one of the hugest voices in that whole commentary, where he tried to tell the monsters that they can stay, that things will work out because of the way that him and Star are together. Technically, Tom being a demon and Star being a human, that would make it like an interracial relationship. And they had a unique way of having to say interracial without saying interracial. And he says, I'm a demon, she's a human, and we're together, we have no problems. But one of the monsters points out that Tom is a prince. So that automatically makes Tom at a different stance, that he is protected. And they call him a rich monster. And Tom says, yes, it's true. I'm rich. But that doesn't mean that when I go into an elevator that I don't make someone feel uncomfortable. That will still follow me. Using the idea of the humans and the monsters, it's like a fill-in-the-blank commentary that you can put any different topics in that for people that have disagreements, and that there needs to be an agree to disagree to get peace within the world. Or just to hear someone out about the unfairness of realizing, hey, why are these two different sides fighting with what's going on here? Let's listen to these sides. Star became that voice of reason, to listen to so many people and hear their story out, regardless of them not being a part of her kingdom or her species. She's a very universally positive character on all fronts. She's such an icon. She's kind of like the Disney version of Sailor Moon. Which brings me to my next part, which is the references made in this show. I've been waiting for this. I actually did this in my last episode. So that'll be the first reference that I'll start with, is Sailor Moon. One of the characters in Star is a monster hunter, one of the top class knights that was like top tier is Mina. Star idolized Mina to no end. And Mina was definitely given a lot of creative liberties from Sailor Moon, just from the iconic meatball hairdo, some of the outfits involved, even some of the stances at Sailor Moon is also put into Mina's character. But I love how it's put in a way that you can clearly tell that it's Sailor Moon, and they're gonna take up every moment they can to make a reference to to have fun with it. The one thing I love with the references in the show is that you can tell they had fun with it. Darren Nefsey, who is the creator of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, did cite that anime was one of the inspirations behind Star vs. the Forces of Evil. There are many darts you can throw to different animes between like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, even Revolutionary Girl Utena, to know how much all of these different animes had influenced her to create this show. And last I heard, Darren Nefsey still updates her Tumblr regularly with how she's drawn the characters, and you can still see the anime influence behind those characters. It breathes new life for Disney while also making a hell of an honor to anime. Anime does not get enough credit for how it influenced many of our medias, but Star by far is the only one that has ever done a wonderful homage to anime. So for the next point that I want to talk about, I didn't have a clever segue. I just couldn't wait to talk about this. And that's the villains of Star. In the new age of Disney shows, leading with Gravity Falls, the villains have improved drastically. Like, Marvel should be taking some fucking notes with how well and almost Shakespearean the new Disney show villains have become. Like, it doesn't get enough credit. So right off the bat, there's Ludo. He is the guy that started the whole story for Star. We have to start with some villain, and Ludo was an appropriate start because Ludo was also very immature. He wanted power but didn't know how to use it. He was almost like a very scary parallel to Star. And there are some points in this show where Star actually saw what her future would look like if she wasn't careful, that she would end up like Ludo. It was never hinted, it was never said, but just the way that Star would look at Ludo, or the way that she would commentate on some things and realize, wow, this guy does not have his shit together. And that became one of the ways that Star matured, was solely with the way that she fought Ludo, but that she also learned what Ludo's life was like. But then it was revealed why Ludo wants the magic. It wasn't just the whole, I want power. Oh, well, yes it is. He does want power, but he had a terrible home life. His mother is getting beat by his father. He unfortunately had to leave all of his siblings behind, and he was the one that was constantly ridiculed. He was kind of like the Michael Jackson in the Jackson family, and his father was like Joe Jackson. That's honestly the best way that I can explain what Ludo's life was like. It's heartbreaking, but it also made me happy in the end run that Ludo did not have a traditional villain ending. He actually had a redeeming factor to his character, and I like how they did that. They kind of just quietly exited him from the rest of the show, knowing that he was okay. He was never going to be the endgame villain, and I like what they did with that. He was a good introductory villain, but he wasn't the villain. Ludo wasn't the smartest villain, but unfortunately he became a part of the crossfire of another villain named Toffee. The character of Toffee is just terrifying. Like, it is one of the most intimidating villains Disney has ever done. And this is coming off the coattails, again, off Gravity Falls, where one of the biggest villains was Bill Cipher, who literally would start the end of the world. Toffee is kind of like the bowling buddy to Bill Cipher. It's the best way to put it. Toffee manipulated Ludo. He manipulated the ones that worked for Ludo. He is like a psychological nightmare for the fact that he does not mind having to gaslight someone, manipulate someone to get what he wants. But that's not the most terrifying thing about him. This man does not mind resorting to murder to getting what he wants. I had to think about the history of Disney villains that have resorted to murder, and you never really hear it point blank said, the word murder. But the way that Queen Moon had to tell Star there's no hope for monsters because my mother was killed by one, and that monster being Toffee. When you look at the whole grand scheme of things, that Star is facing someone who killed her grandmother in cold blood. Toffee is one of the sole starters of why the world is the way it is within Star. I talked about one of the conflicts earlier being the monsters and the Mumins, and Toffee's caught right in the middle, being the one that caused the problems for Mumins to be scared of monsters. Toffee set back monsters and Mumins tenfold, just with the way that he did not mind resorting to murder to get what he wants. He doesn't care about any life, whether it's monster, human, or Mumin. But then there was the ultimate foul that happened when he got a hold of Star's wand. Star was unfortunately trapped within the magic of the wand, and the only way to get her out was to save the wand. And Toffee squashed the last of the portal, and I've never felt stabbed so sharply in my heart when I saw that moment. All the characters had to stop and take a moment to realize Star is gone. For now, of course, but at that moment, you truly think Star's not going to come back because of this man. But then looking at the whole grand scheme of things again, now Toffee has not only killed Queen Moon's mother, but now her daughter. This just keeps getting worse. That knife is just twisting in everyone's hearts. Toffee is like a textbook manipulator. He is basically like the lizard version of like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, with the way that he is charming but so sinister in ways that it makes you fearful when he doesn't have that lax expression on his face. He is very calm, very casual to threatening people's lives. Like, that is the sign of a villain to be afraid of. But to also add icing on the cake, because I find this so ironic, Toffee is voiced by Michael C. Hall. That's the guy that plays Dexter Morgan. I still can't get over that. But also, I can separate him from Dexter Morgan in the way that this is a very different character, but also very underrated. If there's anyone that loves the show Dexter, I implore you, you need to watch him in the show. It's going to make you change the way you see this actor. Toffee was an excellent villain. But the next on my list, it really had me having to really analyze how I saw these villains, because this next one, I'm not gonna lie, it tops Toffee. One of the characters that was introduced is a woman named Miss Heinous, which I love the name. I'm all for a punny name or something that sounds so awful, like the headmaster from Matilda, like Mrs. Trunchbull. Like, oh, it just sounds awful. And Miss Heinous was the character that was the headmaster to reform the princesses and essentially try to hypnotize them. She was kind of like the equivalent of like that song, Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd. Like, she would be like the antagonist or what that song was about, you know? She wanted these princesses to not be individual, to not change, and that was also another one of the unique commentaries that bleeds into the commentary that I mentioned earlier. But the reason why I saved it was to talk about how this went into her character to make the ultimate fucking plot twist. Miss Heinous was a princess, and she was taken from her parents because she is a child born from a Mumin and she is the way she is solely because her kingdom did not want to have anything to do with monsters. They went so far to take a child from her own parents. Like, it's so sick to realize that her life could have been so different if she wasn't taken from her parents, and having to live that life for 60, 70 years, like the weight of the years starts to really make its meaning, to know how long she's been doing this. And when she found out the truth, oh, it just unleashed the beast, and she became the monster that she was born to be. And there was nothing to stop her. Nothing. I was shocked. I would have never thought a secondary character would have one of the best plot twists that I've seen in TV history. And I've seen a lot of plot twists, but this takes the cake. Again, I can't praise it enough. And I'm not going to stop praising the writing for this, for how they were able to make a unique plot twist out of someone who was a recurring character in the first season, became hinted to be a primary character in the second season, and then ended up becoming an integral part of the plot in the third and fourth season. It's pretty phenomenal what they did with her. And on top of that, she is voiced by the best, the most wonderful, and the dearly missed Jessica Walters. And if you don't know who that name is, she's done a lot of things in the business. She was in Play Misty for Me with Clint Eastwood, her first film, and then recently, before her passing, she was the voice of Archer's mom on Archer. So she's already had her name in the game in many different departments, and one of that being voice acting. Her performance as Miss Heinous is one of the best. I am still physically pained that she's not known for this role, for how much she put into this, that you feel the betrayal along with her. This was a character that was just annoying in the first season, and then you felt like you got gun punched along with her in the third season. That all you wanted was justice for her, but then it's also like, I don't know, like, she's also gonna go on a rampage and kill people. Like, there was nothing left in the wake of ruin for Miss Heinous. She went on a rampage and sucked the souls out of characters. And all that was left was just their hollow shells hanging in the wind. I'm like, whoa, God, it was terrifying. And all this came from a secondary character. This villain has stayed with me so much that I still think about it here and there. It was such a powerful villain that it still takes a corner part of my brain. That's how good the writing is. That's how Disney is improving their villains. And then there's the last villain that, kind of took me by surprise, and I don't know how I feel about it. The last villain was Mina. Yeah, so we went from having a villain like Ludo, who was groomed to be the endgame villain, but became more of a redeemed villain. Then there was Toffee, who became one of the first scariest villains, of how him being an unstoppable force was questioning how these characters were going to survive. And then you had a character like Miss Heinous that went from kind of a comedic villain to a tragic villain, and then redeemed, of course. But Mina, I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about Mina being the villain. Like, it's kind of hard having to look at the reference of Sailor Moon being the final villain in the final season. I do understand on the depth of it that it's a character that does not like monsters, which does put her at odds with Star, who is trying to bridge the gap between monsters and humans. But it just seemed a little forced, I gotta be honest. I wasn't feeling it. I felt for Mina being a character that just wanted to follow the rules of the way it was. And I have understood some people that cannot let go of what they know and cannot accept change. And it does make some people into a villain. But this one, it just didn't seem right to me. Her ending was interesting. She just left. She didn't die. She's gone. Like, she wasn't tried for her crimes. And I'm like, really? Like, I kind of would have wanted to see that. Like, her having to actually take penitence for her actions for what she did to so many people. And I felt like that was kind of a low point for the show for me, as many, that in the entirety of the show, everyone took accountability for their actions, and there was a judgment given to characters that were given a fitting judgment. The change of Mina's character did not fit with the way the show had progressed with its lessons, morals, themes, that were doing such a great job. And then Mina basically just did not become a product of the way the show had developed. And that was just a point that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, myself included. And, well, that brings me to my last point, which was the ending of Star versus the Forces of Evil. I saw ahead of time of the low ratings on IMDb, and I saw that it was at 6.9, and I'm like, that's really not good. And I knew I had to see it for myself. And for the most part, I did like the way it ended. The one thing the show has always done for me is that it always had a way of surprising me. Ending the show with magic being gone to save everyone, that was a ballsy move. I would have never guessed that in a million years. The ultimate sacrifice. We've known Star and many of the characters use magic as a way of life and to get by. But knowing that magic was tearing everybody apart, there had to be a change. The show has always had one of the themes of evolution, and these characters were willing to change for the betterment of themselves and others. A great thing to have to show the kids. However, it was a little bit forced near the end that it just ended with parts of Star's world, of the Mumin world, and the human world come together in a very beautiful display, but I'm also like, what's happening? What's going on? And it just ends with Star and Marco going, hi, and I'm like, hi! What's happening here? And then credits. I sat there feeling like I got slapped in the face. I didn't really get the entire resolve that I desired, and I had to think about how this could have changed. We're given this immaculate new morphed world of Earth and the Mumin world, and I would have loved to have seen what that looked like. If this episode was given a final resolve episode to actually get to know what this world is like, I think the show could have had a much better ending. And also, too, I didn't like that it just ended with Marco and Star saying, hi. Like, I wanted them to do more. Even though they weren't the couple I was rooting for, I will be okay with an answer that makes sense. And what makes sense to me is to see Star and Marco actually get their relationship back. It was said that they'd be separated forever due to the wall coming down from the dimensions, and now you get to see them together, and you don't even get to see them together. I get that it's an ending where you use your imagination, but when you have imagination right in front of you, I want to see more of that. I want to put my mind on the back burner and just get to see what someone else can make. This could have had the potential of really setting the stage for future series, or it could have set the stage to have a bigger ending. One thing that I felt also could have helped is if they did the same route of Gravity Falls, where you got to see pictures of Star and Marco together, or the way that Marco's little sister was growing up. Like, I would have loved to have seen that, knowing I would never get to see it, but I got to see, like, the resolve through moments in time. That would have been a much better way to end Star versus the Forces of Evil, but here we are. I had to weigh that heavily with how I watched the finale, that this was already divided, and that I could not let other people's opinions change the way I saw it. But I could also see what people were talking about. I can't deny that. It does feel different. It doesn't feel bad, but it doesn't feel good either. That's why we have the whole term of mixed review, where there's some good in it, there's some bad in it, and both of those things can't really be ignored. There are some good things to take away from it, that it was a different, non-traditional ending. But the bad thing about it is that it was so rushed that there was no way to stick with this ending long enough for it to make an impact. As much as the ending was terrible, it didn't make me change the way I felt about the show. I said in the last episode when I glossed upon Star versus the Forces of Evil that there's a good 3.5 seasons, which makes this show 95% good, but I'd rather have the 95% than nothing at all. This still stuck with me. I love the reference. This caters to everything and who I am today between media references and anime. And I love that. I am never going to find another show that hits all the check marks like this one did. Darren Nefsey truly did make something that not only followed the coattails of Disney, but gave everyone a good time. And I love what she did. I'm glad that I gave a chance on the show that was way out of my age rank, but I felt like it was universal. I'd love to see what else Darren Nefsey creates in the future because, my goodness, she definitely has quite a star. And that is the cheesiest way I may have ever ended an episode. I'm both proud of myself and very, very disappointed in myself for that pun. But this was a good episode. I really enjoyed it. I think this is probably one of the lesser episodes that we've had in quite some time. But this was fun. I really enjoyed it. So now is the time to find out what the next episode is going to be on the Screen Queen. And if you guys didn't know, my birthday falls on April 26th. So that means the next episode is going to be on my birthday. That's so cool. Wow. I'm glad that it happened for my 29th birthday. That's pretty cool. Anyway, let's find out together what this is going to be. This will be like an early birthday present for me. But also, oh no, stuff just fell out of it. Jesus, no, come back here. I need to make this fair. I don't want to have to lose an opportunity. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to try this again. This is dangerous. I wish I had that Vanna White system. Maybe I can wish for that for my birthday. Okay. I feel like that's mixed up enough. Okay, what are you? Tell me your stories. Haha. Well, I'm glad that it ended on a note that is somewhat personal for me. Then again, I mean, all these episodes have been pretty personal for the birthday series, but I hold in my hands a very underrated movie that is near and dear to my heart. And this is one that stayed with me for 20 years. And I love it very much. The next episode on the Screen Queen for the birthday series is going to be Empire Records. Oh my god, y'all are not ready for that one. It's going to blow your minds how underrated that film is. But until then, you get to find that out on the next episode of the Screen Queen. But if you want to catch up with me until then, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. If you would like to see the funny stuff I post up on TikTok, when I do post up on TikTok, you can find me at The Mystical Space Switch. And if you're interested in the book series that I wrote, you can find that in the description box down below. I am starting to feel my voice completely leave me. I am absolutely tired, but I think we had a good time with this episode. Alrighty, you all take care now and stay amazing. This is your Screen Queen signing off. Bye-bye! But to also add icing on the cake, because I find this so ironic, Toffee is voiced by Michael C. Hall. That's the guy that plays Dexter Morgan. I still can't get over that. But also, I can separate him from Dexter Morgan in the way that this is a very different character, but also very underrated. If there's anyone that loves the show Dexter, I implore you, you need to watch him in the show. It's going to make you change the way you see this actor.